Hello, it's the 4th of July. This is Renew Every Morning. I'm Paul Anderson-Walsh, and today in our postcard of grace, we're going to think about Onesimus, the theme being from bondage to brotherhood. I thought that would be an appropriate subject for us on this 4th of July. So to all my American friends, I wish you a happy 4th. And to my dear friend Bruce, this study is for you because I know how much you love this character, and I hope I do him justice for you. Well, Paul says in Philemon chapter 1, and there's only one chapter in Philemon 1 verse 11, he says this: "Formerly he was useless to you, but now he has become useful to both you and to me." I just think that's such a very, very wonderful statement. Formerly he was useless to you, but now he's useful to both you and to me. And this is an important idea. So something has transitioned. Someone in this case has been, if you like, spiritually upcycled. And I think this is a very powerful concept. See, Onesimus was a slave and he was a runaway. He ran from bondage. He ran from a life where his name, interestingly, which means useful, didn't match his reality. His reality was he perceived himself to be useless. And until he got into the hands of Paul, that was going to be his story. But Paul changed his story. Together they learned something, and he became the truth of who he really was. You see, he didn't just run from servitude. It was more profound than that. This is the kind of ache of being seen as a thing, not a person. Do you know, recently Haley and I were picked up in a Bolt taxi by a lady driver, and I jumped in and immediately I was chatting to her, as I always do. And she began in what was a 15-20 minute journey to tell us her story. She was an Ethiopian lady who had been trafficked into a Kuwaiti household. And they referred to her name. This is all they called. They called her Monkey, and they would beat her, and they would treat her the most horrendous way. Anyway, the long and the short of it is she managed to find her. So the family moved, or they were on a holiday or vacation or whatever they were doing, and they were in Europe. And she managed to make good her escape. But she talked to us about the indignity as a human being just being referred to by other humans and summoned and called the name Monkey every single day of her life. And this notion is so hideous. And this is where this story kind of gets me a little bit, because I know that Philemon is one of Paul's insiders, and so I'm interested in seeing how Paul works this whole thing out, because clearly Paul isn't going to honor someone that would treat Onesimus the same way as this family treated this dear Ethiopian lady. So something here isn't quite right. But what's interesting is perhaps the escape has to do with the ache of being seen as a thing, as I said, not being seen as a person. And grace, you see, has a spectacular way of finding a way for fugitives. Oh my God, and we all are one way or another, aren't we? But look at this. Paul, the apostle of freedom, is in a Roman prison where he meets Onesimus. And that's where they meet. The setting for this liberation, the setting for this absolute transformation is a prison. This is in that strange and sacred encounter. He meets Christ in the form of Paul, and Paul meets Christ in the form of Onesimus. Paul doesn't see him as a runaway. He sees him as a son, as a soul reborn. And that for me is so redemptive. And it's in that reframing of Onesimus that he becomes more than useful. He becomes essential. Do you see what I mean? See, sometimes it's what we believe about people that drives how they behave. Their behavior is often fueled by our belief. And that's worth bearing in mind. People can live down to your expectations as well as they can live up to them. And Paul, he refreshes Paul's spirit. Imagine that. This useless so-called runaway slave is now someone that Paul attributes to literally refreshing his spirit. He builds the church from behind the prison walls. And then Paul does something brilliant. Paul sends him back. He sends him back to Philemon because Paul wants to be very clear about what's going on here. Paul wants them to know something. But he's not sending him back as a slave. He's sending him back as a brother. And that is the absolute leveling up. That's the elevation. Jesus, the Christ himself, doesn't see you and I as a slave. He sees us as peers, as brothers. That's the point. He who was nothing less than God became nothing more than a man, in order that we who understood ourselves to be nothing more than men could recognize that we're nothing less than equal with God. Can you, please get your head around that we have been leveled up to that way. I mean, it is just mind-blowing. And this letter then isn't just, it's a real test. It's not just about a runaway servant, but perhaps it's about a master who needs to run away with his own convictions and needs to kind of confront that. You see, it's not about Onesimus returning, it's about Philemon receiving. And I think it's easy to forget that's what this story is really about. Because can love and hierarchy really exist? Can those ideas coexist? Can you have that power dynamic working in that way? I'm not sure. I think we'd have to think about that. Paul doesn't just ask Philemon to forgive Onesimus. He asked to reframe him. That's the point. It's not just he wants him to be forgiven. He wants him to be reframed, because it's the way I see you. As the saying goes, when you change the way you see things, the things you see change. If I see Onesimus as a slave, that's a frame. If I see him as a brother, that's a different frame. And to see Onesimus not by role, but by relationship, because they are equals in Christ. They're co-heirs. And this is the thing that Paul wants him to see. He's no longer his property. He's his partner. And Paul says, oh, by the way, you owe me your very self. But you know what? That's not what we're here for. I want to give you the opportunity to exercise and walk in grace and freedom and power. And that's beautiful, because perhaps Paul is also holding up a mirror, because maybe he's saying, if Onesimus can be reframed, can you? So what's our renewing thought? Our renewing thought here is very simple. This isn't just a story about personal salvation. It's about relational restoration. Jesus is the great restorer. That's the point. It's a call to kind of let power yield to love. Let's do it like that. A call to let forgiveness make room for equity. That's the thing. So it's about going from pardon to parity, if you like. And I think that's maybe a nice way of saying it. You see, Paul talked about this. I think it's in Galatians, he says this. Slaves, obey your masters. And masters essentially do the same. You see, there's not that power dynamic. Slaves, obey your masters. Masters, love your slaves. The idea is then there's no need, there's no tension. That power dynamic, that toxic power dynamic isn't there. Don't threaten them, for you have a master in heaven. And by the way, that's not how your master in heaven treats you. So, this letter to Philemon, this is the gospel lived out in real terms. It's a love letter that confronts status. It's a moment where roles just collapse and relationships rise, because in Christ there are no masters, only members. There are no fixed roles, only stories that are authored by grace. So whether you're Onesimus or whether you're Philemon, whether you're running from shame or resting with your power, know this: grace sends us all back, not to resume the old story, but to author a new one. That is learning love on the job. And may you be renewed, and may you be encouraged. All right, God bless you. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.